Hey, somebody needs to run laps. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to The Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today and with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or a coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to wisdom, deep thought, and observations. That's what we have to offer today. This week, the Professional Noticer is sponsored by Creating Measurable Results. You know, every company wants results, but here's the truth. Most don't know how to create them. Training programs fade, motivational talks wear off, and culture can either push you forward or quietly destroy you from within. At Creating Measurable Results, we do more than inspire. We coach entire organizations from top leadership to the front lines using proven principles that drive profit, performance, and personal growth. We generate higher revenue and attract and retain quality employees and customers. This isn't theory. For years, CMR has equipped teams to transform weaknesses into strengths, align leadership with culture, and create momentum that lasts. And results? Yeah, they're measurable. Because real change doesn't come from a single seminar. Real change happens when coaching becomes a part of your cultural DNA. So if you're ready to stop spinning your wheels and start creating results you can actually measure, visit creatingmeasurableresults.com. Observations and answers. That's what we do here on the Professional Noticer. And today, another different type of episode. I've got to admit a couple of things before we start. In my work with corporate clients and here on the Professional Noticer, I make my living identifying patterns and connecting dots, and that almost always requires deconstructing whatever events have led to the status quo. This is done in order to examine individual pieces of evidence to discover exactly what went wrong and to figure out if and how a new and better puzzle can be reassembled with the same pieces that are now clearly falling apart. To me, the most interesting examinations are of organizations that were once successful but are now experiencing dramatically declining results. I suppose those cases are more interesting to me because I'm a bit of a history nut, and history, if you know how to interpret it, can provide some amazing answers for today's world. This is true of traditional business, and of course, last week we analyzed Cracker Barrel, just as it is true of sports, education, and family. But to correctly diagnose and fix what's wrong, there are two things that must be a part of the process. We must be willing to think deeply, all the way to the bottom of the pool, in order to identify the pattern of little things that are combining to lessen results. And we must accept the truth about where we are, how we got here, and what it's going to take to right the ship. Incidentally, for those of you who are already getting great results from your team or business, this analysis can assist you as you strive for even greater results. And that includes all teams. In the spirit of full disclosure, I have to begin by admitting that I am and always have been an Alabama fan. I was an Alabama fan in my childhood. I was an Alabama fan when I was a student at Auburn. I was an Alabama fan on the practice field at Ohio State. And I was an Alabama fan talking to the Alabama team and in private conversation with Nick Saban. Heck, I even have a pair of red and white pants. Just know that this particular podcast hurts me to do, but I've noticed some things I've kept quiet about for some time, until now. Last week, after the debacle of Alabama's loss to an unranked Florida State, a single public statement from Nick Saban kind of freed me up to talk publicly about the dots I've been connecting for over a year. He said this: I've been around the team a little bit this year at Alabama, went to practice. I see a different culture in the team. Okay, forgive me for interpreting the breadth of what Coach Saban said, but having watched the man personally and professionally for a number of years, I feel safe saying that he noticed the change in culture as soon as he retired. When Nick Saban left in January 2024, Alabama didn't just lose a head coach. It lost a living, breathing operating system. For 17 years, Nick's process was a ruthless culture machine. That culture machine produced clear standards, unparalleled excellent behavior on and off the field, relentless accountability, and final scores that documented the accumulation of a 17-year record that'll likely never be broken. When a system like that one is no longer in place, two things happen immediately. First, the brand remains, and so the talent can buoy a team for a while. Second, the invisible glue, the habits, disciplines, the everyday rituals, the collective standard, begin to be tested. And remember, teams and businesses own a specific culture that is not necessarily what they say it is. Vanderbilt can say, we have a winning tradition. On Enron's website, they listed honesty and integrity as core cultural values. Again, culture is not necessarily what you say it is. Your culture is what you build or what you tolerate. And your fans and customers are the ultimate gauge of your culture, whether it is great, horrible, improving, or slipping dramatically. In the 18 months since Saban stepped away, the evidence is overwhelming. Alabama's team culture has declined. The symptoms of this, or the unacceptable results, are measurable. Penalties, lapses in composure, underperformance as a heavy favorite, and a growing chorus of coaches and broadcasters calling out a lack of effort and discipline. The lesson for any business is blunt. You can inherit assets, but you cannot inherit culture. You got to rebuild it daily. And before we get into the details, let's look at some interesting history that might not have occurred to you, even if you are an Alabama fan. Cedric Burns worked as an assistant, a personal assistant and coordinator for Coach Paul Bear Bryant, and he has remained the right-hand man for every Alabama coach since. And if you're counting, there have been 11. That includes Joe Kynes as an interim coach and Mike Price, who was fired before he ever coached an actual game. Cedric Burns, at least at Alabama, as the old saying goes, knows where the bodies are buried. For decades, he has been an involved fly on the wall, a part of everything that has happened with Tide football. During the 5th year of the Saban era, that's 2 national championships in the books and about to win the 3rd, I was at the Athletic Center one afternoon talking to Cedric, and I asked him if he noticed any differences between the previous coaches he had worked for and Coach Saban. His reply prompted a lot of research on my part. Cedric said, "Oh yeah, it seemed like most of them come in with a different way of doing things. One will do things early, another will wait till the afternoon. One likes this formation, another likes that formation." A lot of coaches during my time and a lot of different opinions and methods. Then he paused and he grinned and he looked kind of side-eyed at me and said, "But I got to say, Coach Bryant, Coach Stallings, and Coach Saban, those 3 are just exactly alike." What does that mean? A player's character was critical to them. Character reveals our thinking, and our thinking is responsible for our culture. The leader's thinking is at the forefront of culture's creation and the increase or the beginning of a team's demise. We can easily make a case with a combination of data and common sense that culture is the deciding factor in failure, mediocrity, success, and overwhelming continued success. Bryant, Stallings, and Saban are the only coaches during Cedric Burns' tenure to win national championships. Collectively, they won 13. 3 coaches, 13 national championships. To put that into perspective, it's more national championships than Notre Dame, USC, or Michigan have won in their 130 seasons. Let's look at Saban's beginnings. For the 10 years before Nick arrived in Tuscaloosa, Alabama had 3 primary coaches, but a total of 5 men who were in charge during that decade. When Mike DuBose took over in 1997, Alabama fans expected to rebuild. In fact, that's exactly what they said. We are rebuilding. And they said that for the next 4 years. When Dennis Franchione took the head coaching reins, we all said, we are rebuilding. We said the same during the brief Mike Price era. And then when Mike Shula arrived, fans and the media continued the thinking. Alabama is rebuilding. When Shula was fired, Joe Kynes expressed the need to rebuild during his interim time as head coach. Then Nick Saban took over in 2007 and posted a 7-6 season. But in 2008, they played an undefeated regular season. And in 2009, Alabama won its first national championship under Coach Saban. So wait a minute. His second season was undefeated? After 10 years of 5 different coaches rebuilding, Saban arrives and in the second year, Alabama is rebuilt? How does that happen? It happens when a culture is dramatically changed. Remember what people used to say about Bear Bryant? They said he could take his team and beat your team, then turn around the next week, take your team and beat his team. To this day, the guys who played under Coach Bryant swear that was the truth. Why? Because they lived the culture Coach Bryant insisted upon. When Coach Saban came to Tuscaloosa, he insisted on a specific culture. Dialing in that culture required him to remove certain players and staffers who did not buy into the thinking, discipline, and 24-hour behavior his culture demanded. But at the end of the day, Nick Saban ran the table, an undefeated regular season with a team that was primarily made up of Mike Shula's players. Culture eats strategy for lunch. When you see an extreme underdog beat major competition, that is an example of the power culture wields over talent. Culture defeats talent. When Troy, a small team in Alabama that is not the Tide or the Tigers, heck, they aren't even South Alabama or Birmingham Southern, but when Troy beats Nebraska and LSU, that's a win for culture. Because no one in their right mind thinks the talent level at Troy is anywhere near the talent level of Nebraska or LSU. How about Appalachian State going into the Big House and defeating Michigan in front of 100,000 of their own fans? Then they beat number 6 Texas A&M in front of their fans. Do you think someone understands culture at App State? Who would that be? Well, get this. Charlie Cobb was Appalachian State's athletic director. When he became athletic director at Georgia State opened the 2019 season by beating Tennessee in Neyland Stadium. Wow. You know, talent retention is culture's first test. Before a new leader ever runs a meeting, the incoming culture can make itself known through who stays and who leaves. In the days and weeks following Saban's retirement, Alabama experienced a significant transfer outflow. including multiple frontline contributors. ESPN summarized the headline losses: Caleb Downs to Ohio State, Isaiah Bond to Texas, and five-star quarterback signee Julian Saban to Ohio State. Julian Saban is starting at Ohio State now, and they're ranked number 1 in the nation. Local and national outlets tallied the broader churn. By late January 2024, roughly 30 players had left Alabama. This is a roster shock that would test continuity at any program. The business parallel is this: when a founder or legend departs, your first cultural scoreboard is the retention of your A players. If high performers leave for competitors, you don't just lose production, you lose standard carriers and culture memory. Succession without recruiting your A players is just abdication. Discipline on Monday and Tuesday is the same discipline that shows up on Saturday. Culture leaks show up first in the controllables. How many times did we hear Bear Bryant say, penalties are a coaching problem? Coach Saban believes that penalties should ideally be unnecessary if players are thinking, disciplined, internally motivated, and accountable. In other words, if the culture is great, penalties are held to a minimum. Do you remember the national championship game Alabama played against LSU? It was a Bama victory, but Coach Saban was most proud that they had only been penalized one time for 5 yards. I gotta add, he was also very upset by that false start. It came within the last 2 minutes of the game. Nick was aggravated because the team didn't play to its potential. Contrast that culture with the current team. Did you know that every game the Tide played during the 2024 season, Alabama was penalized more than their opponent? In every game. By mid-November, the Tide ranked 129th in penalties per game and 130th in penalty yards per game, which is near the very bottom of college football. Alabama's trend lines reflected self-inflicted damage. In business, penalties are operational waste, rework, defects, missed handoffs. If your team is talented but kind of sloppy, you don't have a performance problem. You have a culture problem. Culture is often best defined by how leaders behave when the lights burn the hottest, when the stage is biggest. You remember the stunning October 2024 loss at Vanderbilt? Alabama's permanent captain, Malachi Moore, drew penalties in the closing moments. He threw his mouthpiece across the field. He ran up and kicked the ball off the line after the referee had already spotted it and the teams were lining up for the next play. Then he refused to come off the field after being ordered to by the defensive coordinator. Worse, during the following week, Malachi Moore, with a C on his jersey, the captain's jersey, Malachi Moore was never even punished. The head coach said he simply made a mistake. I got to say, most parents know that Malachi Moore did not make a mistake. He made a choice. A mistake is when you do something you didn't know was wrong. When you know an action is wrong and you do it anyway, that's a choice. And it speaks volumes about the malignant culture that will allow you to get away with it. Here's a business parallel. When your cultural standard bearers lose control publicly, everyone on the team recalibrates what is acceptable. If captains and managers can rant or defy the process without any consequences and get away with it, then there are no standards because the standards have become suggestions. What about Alabama's underperformance, even when they're heavy favorites? The single clearest on-field culture tell is performance versus expectation. In 2024, Alabama lost multiple games as a significant favorite, most memorably as a 24-point favorite at unranked Vanderbilt, an upset so historic that national media highlighted it as a once-in-decades event. Worse, Alabama was routed 24-3 at unranked Oklahoma, an opponent that was not even bowl eligible until that win. This was not a down-to-the-wire loss either. This was a complete performance gap. Layer on the 2024 bowl loss to unranked Michigan and the 2025 opening day loss to unranked Florida State, and you get a trend. The Tide is repeatedly coming up small in games they were expected to control. Analysts have underlined a stat that crystallizes the problem. Nick Saban coached 235 games at Alabama and lost 4 to unranked teams. The current head coach has lost 4 games to unranked opponents in the first 14 games. That sobering comparison has been cited across outlets, including Reuters and Sports Illustrated. The business parallel is that losing a game as a heavy favorite is the corporate equivalent to blowing an easy quarter. When customers and investors expect competence, but they get chaos, your brand premium becomes a brand tax. Culture is how you meet expectations, especially the easy ones. What do possession time and third downs reveal? Well, they reveal hidden cultural metrics beyond the headline scores or operational key play indicators that scream culture. In the Vanderbilt upset, Alabama lost the time of possession game. Vanderbilt held the ball 42 minutes and 8 seconds to Alabama's 17 minutes, 52 seconds. And Alabama also allowed 12 of 18 third down conversions. You can win with a lot of different kinds of styles, but you can't win consistently if you can't get off the field. The Associated Press and ESPN have called out time of possession and third down conversions specifically. The business parallel is that third down is your company's critical path. It's do or die time. If your team can't finish tasks, close customers, or exit escalations, you don't have a playbook problem. You have a cultural problem. The locker room speaks when culture frays. When culture is fraying, the locker room will tell on itself. After the 2025 opening loss at Florida State, Alabama players held a players-only meeting. Tight end Josh Cuevas acknowledged it publicly, and outlets from On3 to Sports Illustrated covered it. Players-only meetings can be productive, but they're also a classic early season indicator that standards and messaging are not landing and the culture's in trouble. Business parallel, teams smell disconnects. If executive tone or internal communication stay upbeat while customers churn and results slide, people conclude that leadership is out of touch or that results don't really matter as much as they say they do. External audits of culture, the broadcast booth and the coaching fraternity, are very accurate. If you want a clean read on culture, listen to the people who don't owe you anything. After the Florida State loss, ESPN's Dan Orlovsky said, if Nick Saban watched this tape back yesterday, he would have kicked some of these kids off the team. They looked like a shell of what Nick Saban had built: effort, toughness, desire. Paul Feinbaum, the longtime SEC voice, called the team soft and undisciplined. These are external audits that few programs ever receive, and it's centered on culture, not talent. These are not fringe podcasts. These are mainstream platforms that are watched by recruits, they're watched by donors, and every opponent on Alabama's schedule. The business parallel is this. When respected voices repeatedly cite performance, attitude, effort, and discipline, you don't have a messaging problem. You have a culture problem that marketing cannot fix. Some people say, but they still beat Georgia and LSU last year. Well, to be fair and complete, Alabama did notch a couple of blue chip wins in 2024, beating Georgia and LSU. But for a culture, inconsistency is not neutral. It is corrosive. A great day, a great performance shows the ceiling. Culture will show you the floor. When your lows are Vanderbilt and Oklahoma in November, your floor is telling you that your standards are episodic, not institutional. The business parallel? Spike performance. It gives leaders false comfort. If your team wins big presentations but botches renewals, you don't own excellence, you rent it. 5 cultural key play indicators every leader should track, and what Alabama's data says. Here we go. Use these 5 lenses to audit your own organization. A retention of standards and the standard carriers. Who are the Justin Say and the Caleb Downs, Isaiah Bond equivalents in your organization? And do they stay when things change? If not, why do they believe the standard would be higher somewhere else? How about operational waste? Penalties, rework, defects. What is your trend over the last 90 days? Alabama's 2024 penalty profile was near the bottom nationally. Culture doesn't tolerate that. Culture corrects it. How about performance versus expectation? Are you winning the heavy favorite games? The easy quarters, the slam dunk deals, the simple deployments? Alabama's ongoing losses to unranked teams are the canary in the coal mine. Composure of leaders is a big one. When a leader melts down publicly, what happens next? Public apology is a start, but internal accountability is the cultural fix. How about message alignment? Players-only meetings are warning sirens that your culture is on its last legs. Can your employees change their culture without their leaders providing specific coaching? Nope. So what do? Here's a quick playbook for rebuilding culture. Whether you run a team, a factory, a region, or an entire company, Alabama's last 18 months hand you a to-do list. 1, re-recruit your people, especially your A team, your standard bearers. Re-recruit them constantly. Don't assume loyalty, earn it. The portal in college football also exists in business. LinkedIn is everybody's portal. 2, make discipline visible and quantified. Publish your penalties per week. Let everybody know about the late deliverables, the quality miscues, the product disasters. Put a cost on them and celebrate clean runs. Culture is what you repeatedly reward and repeatedly fix. Number 3, reset the standard for your captains. Put your managers, your leaders on film. If a leader melts down in a client meeting, which would be your Vanderbilt game, they should apologize, but they should also lose privileges until they demonstrate recovery and modeling. Number 4, win the easy ones. Build a heavy favorite protocol for low variance, process-driven execution on easy quarters. Instead of post-morteming a loss, pre-mortem your simple projects. Over-practice the basics. Every Vanderbilt you prevent is cultural equity in the bank. Number 5, eliminate message gaps, and especially messages that don't make sense. Don't preach, have fun while the building's on fire. Stop the ridiculous slogans that nobody even thinks about anymore and run a block and tackle month of fundamentals focused on 3 behaviors: communication, urgency, and finishing. Just like a great coaching staff would emphasize effort to the ball, angles, and tackling. It's the final word to leaders. Coach Saban used to say, "Don't waste a failure." Alabama's recent failures, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, Michigan, Florida State opener, are a cultural wind tunnel. It's not proof that the program is broken forever, but it is proof that culture can't be grandfathered, and a brand can't run the ball on 3rd and 4. Just because you're Alabama doesn't mean anything today. On culture, yesterday never scores for you today. If you lead a company, here's your halftime talk. Talent, that's the table stakes. Culture is what takes talent into Tuesday and turns Tuesday into national championships. You cannot borrow it. You must build it. And when you build it, the scoreboard will find you. Bottom line, post-Saban Alabama is a case study in the difference between inheriting success and inheriting standards. The talent is still top tier, but culture, the daily translation of attitude, behavior, discipline, and habits, they've slipped. The data says so. The film says so. The booth says so. But in football and in business, the cure is the same. Correct the culture or build on the good culture you have, and the results will shock everybody. I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing the tiny bit of mental energy I have for you, seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. To find out more about how I coach entire organizations and change their culture, check out creatingmeasurableresults.com or yourcmr.com. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye.